It is being called everything from Armageddon to World War III, and that may not be far off. Lawmakers going head-to-head over how to slash $14.4 trillion in debt. Here's the House Speaker, John Boehner, saying that they must take action immediately.
I've watched leaders for the 20 years I've been in Washington. They see this big debt problem every year, and they look up, and it's like looking at a mountain. And they see how tall it is, they see how steep it is, and then they decide, nah, we'll kick the can down the road another year. Well, guess what? We're running out of the road to kick the can down.
Well, former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty is now the first Republican candidate to lay out his plan for the economy. I talked to the governor just a short time ago. You know, the Wall Street Journal calls your economic agenda the most ambitious so far. In short, what are you calling for, Governor?
Well, I'm calling to get our country moving again. We've got a president who seems to be satisfied with anemic levels of growth. I don't buy his declinist attitude for America. I want to get the country moving, so we set a big goal for economic growth. And we're also calling for big pro-growth tax cuts, but also cuts in spending, so we make sure we don't harm the deficit going forward over the next 10 years.
Your tax proposal is what for families making less than $100,000 and those making above that number?
Yeah, for individuals, we would just have two tax rates, 10% for anybody making under $100,000 and 25% for people making over $100,000, and that would be different than the 6 tax brackets that now exist. But it would be roughly a 30% rate reduction for both people in middle and lower incomes as well as higher incomes.
How does that grow the economy, Governor?
Well, everywhere I go, Bill, when you have people who are in business, trying to start businesses, grow businesses, but more specifically add jobs and keep employees, they say, get the government off my back. It's too expensive to do business in this country as measured by taxes and regulation and other things. So this lightens the load and encourages and incentivizes them to grow and to invest and to get our economy moving again, not through government, but through the private economy.
Speaking of growth, your plan calls for growth of 5% a year. I mean, even in some of the best times in recent memory, if you go back to the late 1990s, it was not even at that mark. I think between 1996 and 1999 is 4.7. 5% is asking for a lot.
Both under Presidents Reagan and Clinton, we had almost 5% growth twice once in the 80s, once in the 90s. So it's a stretch goal, it's an aspiration, but it's an aggressive goal. But I want to set a big goal, a big positive goal for the country. I don't buy the fact that we're just going to be average or we're just going to lag behind the rest of the world in growth. It's crazy. The Congressional Budget Office says the economy is only going to grow about 2% a year for the next 10 years. That's anemic. I don't think we want an anemic America. I think we want a strong, growing, accelerating America. We need a leader who's willing to set that goal and then talk about the specific things needed to get it done.
I know you're in Chicago today. What should Republicans in Washington do about the debt ceiling?
Well, I think the debt ceiling is really a spending ceiling. I hope they don't raise it, but if they do, I hope they get something good for it, the structural permanent reform that the government needs. Well, I think in terms of what they get, I'd like to have a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, or at the very least, some caps on spending as a percent of gross domestic product, GDP, or some real significant structural reforms of our entitlement programs.
We saw a poll that came out this week. Washington Post has you trailing President Obama in a head-to-head matchup by, 7, 8 points. But Mitt Romney, among registered voters, was actually beating President Obama. That's you down 9, and here is Mitt Romney up about 3 points, 49 to 46%. If you were the nominee, what's the contrast America would see between Tim Pawlenty on stage and Barack Obama?
Well, keep in mind on those polls, Bill, early on, still about half the country doesn't even know who I am. So if you put my name up against Barack Obama, it's not really a fair measurement because over half the people being sampled, or somewhere approaching half, don't even know my name. So know that that's not a very good measure of how I do against Barack Obama in the long run as I get better known.
Well, if I could just point out, ironically, Quinnipiac came out with a poll today that showed you in single digits. Now, this is among Republicans now. Now, how do you change that?
Well, we're not interested yet in the national polls. I mean, we are, but we're particularly focused on the early states of Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. if the early polls were a good measure of who is going to win, Rudy Giuliani would be president, or Howard Dean would be president, or Hillary Clinton would be president. They almost never predict the final outcome. And I know people are interested in them, but they're not good predictors of how the race is going to go. But how you change it is you have a good message about how to grow the economy, how to grow jobs, and you campaign hard in those early states, get momentum, and then it goes on from there.
Governor, thank you for your time today. I know your big message about the economy. We will track it from here. Tim Pawlenty in Chicago today. Thank you, sir.